Wednesday. It is Wednesday, and it is the 1st of April, if you can believe it. This year it's scooting by. And so today we have Jessica Banner on call with us on the Zoom side. We have Julie Mills Watson over here on the Zoom side. And we also have Jeanette Lasky over here with us. And so we are opening up the month. I know you had one last week, but we're opening the month for Living Well Wednesday. We are talking about our future and being focused. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jessica and get us live on all the other areas, and then I'll be back.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Jessica Banner. I am been on the panel, gosh, going almost on 3 years. And just really excited this month, but a little bit about me. I have a master's degree in rehabilitation counseling. I have been in the field of counseling for about 18 years, did 10 of that in mental health until I transitioned into private practice in pastoral counseling, where I predominantly do trauma resolution counseling. I have my hands in other projects. I've been writing books. I've recently started a podcast called Grace to Care for caregivers and providing care for caregivers. And I'm also working on developing a program, a school to train pastoral counselors to provide trauma-informed care. And so just hands in lots of places, very busy season of my life. Miss Julie, would you introduce yourself to us?
Hi, I am Julie Mills Watson, and the Wellness Navigator of Body of Health and Life. Been in the wellness industry about 20 years, and mainly in massage therapy with a specialty in lymphatics. Through the years, I have also gotten a health coaching certificate, and I'm just all about what can you do to support your body. Life's going to happen, and we do need our medical community for that, for sure. But what can we do to support our body and to prevent prevent those big diagnoses? So happy to be here and contribute what I can.
Absolutely. We're so happy to have you and our team. Ms. Lisa, I'm going to have you introduce yourself too.
Yeah, absolutely. I was getting ready to. I was like, ooh, do I? Well, my name is Lisa Muth. I live in San Antonio, Texas. My husband is in the military. He's been in almost 23 years. I was in almost 10 years. And so I'm a veteran, and I am a work at home, stay at home mom. We're super busy all the time, but I love GCBN and I love the platforms that we offer to our members. And so I kind of like to say I'm the ninja behind the scenes with Miss Rose. And we do some things behind the scenes to help Miss Beth and to augment wherever she needs us. And so yeah, so that's what I do. And I also have a virtual assistance business where I have a couple of clients that I help virtually. I have a realtor client, a church organization that I help Beth here with the nonprofit. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I love Jesus. We're very active in our church. Yeah, so that's me.
Awesome. And Miss Jeanette, I know you're joining us as a guest today, but I'll let you introduce yourself as part of our community.
Sure. Sure. So I've been with GCBN for a year now. Met everybody at the gala back in December 2 years ago. So that was my introductory. I found GCBN through an Eventbrite. So it definitely stuck. I was like, we're worshiping and we're talking business. This is the elbow rubbing I want to do for business. And I am in a wellness business, actually. My service is helping people with stuck patterns. So I have the massage background and a specialty in myofascial therapy. So thank you.
Nice. I remember that. I was sitting at your table at the gala. So, Aisha, are you able to introduce yourself? If not, we'll go ahead and get started. So, Julie, if you'll get us started with our scripture for this week, and then we'll jump right in.
Okay, it's Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future.
Thank you so much. So today we're going to start by jumping in. We're going to explore how faith fuels our futures. Because this month our big topic is faith forward, future focus, and forgive. And last week we took a deep dive into forgiveness and about how forgiveness really opens our hands to receive fully what God has for us. And so today we're going to talk about how faith fuels our future by being able to connect us with God. So as we jump into that today, one of the foundational principles of being spiritual is our faith. And that's true when we have faith in something, it is to believe in something. And so it is one of those core keystones or cornerstones. And in Christian faith, faith is really a necessary component to fostering our relationship with God, Jesus, Holy Spirit. And in God's kingdom, we see time and time again that our measure of faith is met with God's love, purposes, and resources. So today I want to look at 4 areas of faith and God's promises and plans for our futures on the other side of our faith. So as we get started today, the first area I want to talk about is faith. When we have faith in the doubt and fear, it equals faith in God's goodness. And so in Joshua 1:9, it says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Doubt and fear are a normal part of human emotion, right? They inform us about our past pain, but they also create concerns about potential and future pain, right? That's what doubt and fear and that design of what they do. We see in scripture, we're roughly encouraged about 100 times to fear not and do not be afraid. Faith does not imply we will not feel the fear and the doubt. Instead, faith in the face of doubt and fear suggests we are believing and trusting God in his goodness, that he wants what is best for us. So my first question as we get started in talking about this is, what steps can we take to address our fear and doubts to live from a place of faith in God's goodness? I know it's a big question. So today is full of big questions because it's big topics. So any initial thoughts, ladies, about what it takes to address fear and doubt so we can live from that place of faith in his goodness?
Somebody told me years ago, and it rings true today, is she had this is back before our smartphones and everything. So she had these index cards, and she had actually typed down and cut out verses for me and put them on a ring, and so I could flip through them and just read verses when I needed to, when I was scared. My late husband had brain tumors, and we had a lot of ups and downs with that. And she said, whenever you're afraid, lean into God. And I didn't know how to do that. What does that look like? You can pray all day long, but sometimes I needed something tangible. So I would grab that little thing. I still have it. And I would read scripture. So I think a step to address the fear and doubt is to lean into his word, and search his word, and it gives you comfort.
Absolutely.
That's
Love
good.
that.
I think of, if I can add, I think of a long time ago, I was a little girl and I was afraid of the moon. Like now we're going around the moon and all the things, but I was afraid of it. And I don't know if it may have been things that I saw on TV or, kids chattering around, or maybe it was around Halloween and there's just a spooky time, for kids about that. But I was like, there's werewolves and moon and it's scary. And so I remember my mom, and I will never forget this. I remember her caring about that instead of shushing me down and being like, there's no wolves, or the moon is fine. But she literally took me outside, sat me on top of the roof of her car, and it was a dark night and the moon was really bright. And she said, look, it's the moon. You don't have anything to be afraid of. Do you see the man in the moon? And she's like calling out things and physical features of this thing that I'm so scared about, right? And from then on, I wasn't scared. So I liken that to say there are things, maybe it's not the moon, but maybe it's something that's a diagnosis or a future, or like we move a lot because of the military and the fear of that. Am I going to find friends? Am I going to find a house? Are we going to find a church? But it's really pulling back the layer of that, caring that you're concerned about a thing, and then facing that with the truth of the thing, you know? And then when you've gone through a thing, and whether it's the moon or a move or a diagnosis or loss of friendships or community changes, when you've gone through that, then you have that to lean back on. So there is that foundation again. We talked about foundation a little bit yesterday, but so facing it with truth and facing it with the foundation, which is what Julie said with the word, right? Our foundation is built on Christ and the word. So I know that's just a little tiny story, but just to put it into perspective that like, just face the truth of it. And some things are big and scary. They really are. But God is bigger than the boogeyman is what the VeggieTale song says.
I love what both of you said. And, you know, I haven't found, I didn't go back because this thought just popped in my mind, but I remember learning in school how really when we're born, we're only born with like 3 innate biological fears, like the fear of falling. They're like biologically wired into us, and they're literally about saving our lives, right? And so, but outside of those really kind of 3 things that we're kind of biologically wired to save our lives, all of our other fear is really based on experience. And it may not be direct experience. Sometimes we have fear from the experience we hear about if in other people or things that we learn about. And obviously from the things that have created pain. You know, in our neurobiological system, one of the things that's wired in our survival system as humans is when we've experienced something, the mind and the body create a blueprint for that. This kind of thing. It takes in that information and preserves it for your future, right? Like if I almost drown, it preserves information about water and how I need to show up, right? And but part of the issue of that is one of the things the brain does is it generalizes that information when we have that fear. And so then it becomes something that starts to impact us, even if there's other information that can inform the situation. Right. And so often our fear and our doubt are rooted in those places of experience, whether it was our own or observed in others, or even things that we read or watched. And I love what you said, Lisa, about her taking you out and sitting you on the roof of the car, because that made me think about the Father's heart, that he cares. He doesn't just say, don't be afraid, right? He doesn't say that with a callous heart. He's willing to walk through the doubt, through the fear. He's willing to explore it with us, right? And some of the ways we do that in the here and the now, maybe with coaches and counselors, or with our spiritual leadership, pastors, pastoral support, small group leaders, even sometimes friends and accountability. Those are places we get to say, this is a fear I have. Let's look at it, right? A lot of times it is that boogeyman, right? If it hides in the closet, I don't actually know what I'm dealing with. But my imagination can make it all kinds of things, right? And so when we're unwilling to look at what I'm afraid of or why I'm afraid of it, oftentimes our imagination allows that monster to grow. I call it a fear monster in a lot of the training that I do, right? But the beauty of it is when I can look at a thing, I get real tangible data about what is this and what is it not. And what I love about what you said, Julie, is we get the truth, which also gives us more information about that thing we're looking at, right? There are so many things in scripture that inform us the truth about relationship, the truth about, money, the truth about how we live, the truth about um, even our shelter and our food, right? Like how many scriptures talk about his provision and and so being embedded in that word gives us even more clarity about that thing that we're looking at. And so, and oftentimes it undergirds that no matter what has happened, because we do live in a world that is wounded and fallen, that his truth will undergird that, and that his goodness undergirds all of it. It was his original plan for us. And so it takes faith to have fear. You can have faith in your fear, because faith is that belief, right? Or you can have faith in his goodness. And when we're talking about being future focused, what we believe in produces fruit in our lives, right? I don't know if you ladies have experienced that, but what I have believed in has certainly produced fruit in my life. So did you have any thoughts, Jeanette? Anything you wanted to share?
Absolutely. When I go into a fear and doubt kind of place, it usually means that I've lost control. And scripture helps me remember that I am not the one in control. So I have to give it over to God. So letting him do his will and not put me at the top, right? Put God at the top and give it over. And that helps me understand that I'm following his will and not mine.
Absolutely. That's so good. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how faith in the act of submission equals faith in God's trustworthiness. So Proverbs 3:5-6 implores us that trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him and he will make your path straight. I don't know about you guys, but many people wrestle with the word submission. Many. And that rightfully so, because it has a strong meaning with deep implications about our sense of free will, right? And to submit, according to the Oxford Languages, means to accept or yield to a superior force or to the authority or will of another person. That's got some deep meaning, right? And so having faith to submit of our own free will, therefore, requires faith and trust. And I put a little caution here to say that forced submission is not a true act of submission. It is a form of control by another party. Okay. So we're not talking about forced situations, because true submission is a choice that I have chosen to accept. Even in that definition, I have chosen to accept or yield to something that I see as higher. And so in Proverbs 16:3, it also says, commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. God does not force submission, right? He asks for it, and his promise in freely committing ourselves to his good plans and good intentions for us. And so there, and I'll save this in a minute, but my question to you guys as we look at that, the act of what it is to submit, being really a faithing, trusting God and his trustworthiness, what helped you to overcome the wrestle with submission to the Lord? And what has been the benefit of trusting God in your life? This one got personal, but
I'll speak to this.
Sure.
I went through a time in my life where I was dealing with some illness, and I had about 3 hours of activity a day. And I wouldn't say this was like the time where I hadn't known God. This is where I knew God very well. And I was very faithful at this time. So, you know, the life struggle was probably about 10 years before this happened. And it is a little daunting, like, why am I going through this? You know, but staying strong in my faith, I knew to lean in and say, what can I learn from this? What are you trying to teach me?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I kind of felt like Jonah and the whale. You know, I'm here in the bottom pit of a whale, and I know I can hear God, but I couldn't necessarily know where I needed to jump into. You know, what's the next thing? So I had to submit to just the waiting for his plan.
Absolutely.
The first thing that comes to mind, especially after hearing what you're saying, is submit and surrender are one and the same for me. I surrender my life to him, which makes it very easy to submit. Does that make sense? So I don't look at it as a domineering thing. I look at it as a surrender to him. And when I resist it and want to do things my way, it's almost like he is just laughing and saying, honey, it ain't gonna work. And things don't work out. And it's like putting a square peg in a round hole. So submitting and surrendering to the Lord is a much easier way.
Both of those are really good. I think of I get to do redos a lot, like redo, because I will submit or surrender, and then I'll be like, oh wait, maybe not, maybe I don't. So I think of when I was first saved, there were a lot of things that came super easy to me, a lot of things that the Lord maybe talk to me, and I just completely just gave that up. I remember some was music. Like I had a huge disc binder disc back in the day. It was CDs, and all those CDs were in there, and it was, various different music. And I'm not saying, for me, it was my conviction that the Lord was like, we need to get rid of that. And I'm not saying you have to get rid of your music. Okay. What I'm saying is Lisa's story. This is Lisa's story. And I remember being in the dorms in Germany, breaking these discs and chucking them into a trash can. And my roommate from not roommate, but across the dorm, he was going to his hallway and into his room, and he's looking, because I had my door open and I'm chucking these discs, and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, this is trash. And if I don't need it, nobody needs it. So I'm going to break it. And he's like, what? And he's looking at it, and it's like what, the world would say good music, And he's like, you are crazy. And I'm like, I'm crazy for Jesus. So some things were easy, some things were not so easy. And so I think the longer time that I've spent with the Lord, the easier it is for me to submit. Not that I do it well, and I get redos all the time. And to Jeanette's point also, is often in times of trials or crisis, like that's when you can be tested to give it to him, because you have no other choice. I remember when we brought Jude home from the NICU, and we had to gravity feed him through a feeding tube. And that was crazy. And we had no choice but to call on the Lord, because I couldn't do it. John couldn't do it. Jude obviously wasn't doing it. It took 2 hours to feed that boy, and then he just gurgled it right back up into the tube. And I'm like, what is happening? So at that point, you're just like, God, you just have to, I don't know what to do. You have to take it, because I can't. And he doesn't have to take it, but he chooses to, because he's a gentleman and he loves us. And that's where he wants us, is to that point of no return. Like, he is it, and that's it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. A couple things that come to mind for me is trust is something that's not usually inherently given, right? It's something that builds over time, right? Like, there are things I may know about somebody that up my initial trust, right? Like when I met Lisa or Julie or even Jeanette, right? Like, I met Julie and Lisa through Beth, and I already had relationship established with Beth. And so they were afforded a level of trust because they'd already been vetted through somebody that I trust, right? So sometimes knowing and having some forethought does allow us to step into something with more trust. But the truth is, even beyond that initial trust, it's taken time and building relationship to expand levels of trust, right? So trust is not this fixed thing. It is something that's very fluid in it grows and it can be lost, and it can grow and it can be lost. And again, there's things that inform what trustworthiness is. And it's what I love about part of what you shared there, Lisa, is because that doing it again, we learn things about God. And even in our trials and things that we've been through, we learn something on it, and to live through them is painful and it's hard, but we also learn something about ourselves. We learn something about God. We learn something about the support people in our lives, because that trustworthiness stands underneath it. And so I want to encourage you because you may be in different seasons of your relationship with the Lord. And this is a sidebar. This is not a scripture thing. This is an observation, Jessica thing. Okay. So let me set that up to get go. I've been in counseling for, again, almost 18 years, and I've done my own counseling. And I've been in ministry and in the kingdom for over 20, and so when I look at that and all these experiences I've had, I always meet people, I always tell people when we're gifted in different things, I said, we're all called to the Great Commission. I said, but some people are really gifted in the Great Commission. I said, I am that person. I meet people when they got saved, but now they're going to decide, do I really trust God and am I going to give it all? I don't know if you guys have been around people long enough in the journey, but there's always that initial, I got saved and God showed up and I had that experience of his love. But then there's that place as we walk in faith where it meets our humanity and it meets our experiences, and and the places that we're hurt in our hearts start to show up, and the places where we have those doubts and fears start to show up. I always tell people I meet people in the second part of that process. Am I going to let him heal me and give myself fully to him? That's where I have always been. And I think about that because like we talked about with fear and doubt, even there's things that inform our ability to submit. It's not natural in us because we want to be in control of ourselves. That's our free will, right? But I want to speak to the trauma piece, especially because of the mental health side of this. When we've experienced trauma, it usually means that there was a, quote, forced submission to something I didn't actually agree with that harmed me in some capacity, right? And trauma can be to the extent of severe abuse, but trauma can also be defined as really anything that contradicted my beliefs and my values and my expectations that caused loss where there was never any resolve, right? And so those things that we store up, when someone pushed something on me that created harm for me in some capacity, it gave us this false understanding of submission, right? And that's why I wrote that about that forced submission. Forced submission is not an actual act of submission. You didn't choose to accept or yield to somebody, right? But when we have those experiences, it absolutely impacts our ability of how we trust others going forward. It's that generalization that I talked about with the brain. And so one of the beautiful things with the Lord that I think is so important in submission is that God will meet you exactly where you are. I remember my own wrestle in that, and we went back and forth about it, and my heart was for God. I wanted what he wanted for me, but there was something about this. What does this mean? What does this mean? And it was in the woundedness, right? I had to go to counseling and do the work. I'm honest with that about to people about that, because there were things I had been through that gave me it gave me a false perspective of what submission actually meant, which is why I love what you said, Julie, about what it actually means to surrender, right? And that very act of surrender, though, does undergird that implication that I'm giving myself over to someone who can be trusted. And so I just want to say, for any of you in that process, God knows exactly where you are, and he knows where that's been a struggle and why that's been a struggle, if it has been. And he's willing to meet you there, right? He's willing to walk those parts of your heart out. He's willing to step into the healing. One of the things God said to me last week when I was writing the script for last week about forgiveness, it's funny how you can see a thing forever, but you suddenly see it through new lens. And that happened last week when I was working on the script, when God was talking to me about the crucifixion of Jesus and how bloodshed was the historic covering of sin, right? And so by his blood, the sin debt was paid. But it doesn't stop there. God didn't stop at the debt being paid. He continued that by his stripes we were healed. And there was something about, like, as long as I've known that my whole life, there was something in this that God didn't just cover the sin, he gave us the gift of healing through the sacrifice of Jesus. And I don't know why that stuck out to me so big last week, but it was such a thing to see that even though God came and settled our debt, he settled the debt he didn't even create. He also gave us a gift. He settled the debt and gave us a gift that we could be recovered from all that was a byproduct of that thing that we chose. And in the world we live in, sometimes it's the thing other chose for us that was not okay, right? And so to me, that was such a beautiful thing. And I had to walk through my own process of that because I had my own stuff. And so I think my encouragement is just that he will meet you in that process, whether it's small group and being in the word. And he celebrates the small steps in surrender, you guys. I don't know about you ladies, but every time I could give him a little more of my heart and a little more trust to him, I always saw the fruit of that. So I just want to encourage that too, that he will encourage you along the way because faith builds faith, glory to glory, right? So just be encouraged in that. Any other thoughts as we wrap out that on submission? Lisa's like, nope, go forward.
No, you covered it. And that was good. That was really good. Thank you for sharing that.
So my next thought was faith in the waiting is faith in God's timing. So when we're having faith in that, I see you, Julie. Those were big eyes. So, in our human nature, we don't usually love to wait. The discomfort for us only increases exponentially if in the waiting there is pain, stretching, or doubt. Faith in the waiting often demands believing for a future that we cannot see and we cannot produce on our own. When we offer our faith in the space of waiting, we are really putting our belief in God's timing, that he has a time when there will be an alignment of people, resources, and our own personal development. God's promise is clear in Habakkuk 2:3. For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It surely will come. It will not delay. So my question for you ladies is, what has helped you keep faith in the waiting? And how does faith in the waiting fuel our future focus? Told you big questions today.
Well, wouldn't you say that experience helps in that, that you're impatient, you tried your own thing, and then you waited and you had almost given up. Sometimes you feel like you give up.
Mm-hmm.
And then God delivers. And then when you witness that, that gives you more faith.
Mm-hmm.
In that waiting. Of course, scripture throughout, there's waiting and teachings, but there's nothing like experiencing it on your own. To wait. So there's times where you're not sure of his purpose for you. That's a big one we talk about in GCBN and NACWE and whatnot, is what's God's purpose. And you feel like you know what it is, but you still got a lot of waiting to see if the pieces come together. And it can be a year, it can be 2 years, and you're just like, okay, well, maybe I'm not cut out for this. And then all of a sudden doors just open all around you, and you're like, oh. So I think experiencing it helps a great deal. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I've experienced it.
I think that's absolutely true, that experience can help us in the waiting. Aisha, you have your hand raised, so do you want to share with us?
Yes. Yeah, sorry I didn't introduce myself. I didn't really know.
You're good.
Yeah.
You're good.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, when you ask that question, it is a big question, but I think what's bigger is the humility that it takes for us to actually process the fact that we have to wait. That's a hard pill to swallow. I mean, just in life in general. And it kind of leads me, I actually wrote an entire book on this, and I called it, my perspective is actually that waiting season, I called it preparation stew.
Mm.
All the different ingredients that go into developing us for our purpose. And that sounds nice and cute or whatever. And of course, I wrote the book when I was in my 20s. So, it was a nice way for me to kind of, make sense of what seemed like a lot of failure
Mm.
and what seemed like a whole lot of God and me time with no physical fruit, no, you know, accomplishments, no checking off the boxes. But oh, yeah, we have this great relationship with God. We can help a lot of people. But what does this look like to the world? So the waiting, how I resolve it, even today, I mean, it's like my whole life has been on. Have you seen those moving escalators at the airport?
Yes.
Sort of you get on it and you continue to go, and it's like leading you. You're going to get on a plane at some point, but you don't really know when it's going to stop. And then another one comes up, and then you get off, and then you walk a little, and then another one comes up. Life is, for me, has been like that. So when you talk about waiting, it is a big trigger, a trigger, a good trigger. Um, and at some points in my life, it has been very emotional, of course, but I resolve it by saying that has been the greatest time of my life to prepare all the different ingredients, every season in my life, and whoever talked about, and then things open up. I think that was Miss Julie. That's what happens at each point in my life when I had to wait for a long time, almost give up, did give up. When the door opens, I ended up getting all the tools that I needed for that next assignment. So that's what I wanted to say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was really great. Miss Lisa, Miss Jeanette, any thoughts about that?
Okay, I'll go. I was waiting on Jeanette. I'm like, are you gonna go? Listen, I'm an impatient person. I'm just being 1,000% transparent. And it is not easy to wait. It's not easy to wait in traffic. It's not easy to wait in a line at a grocery store. It's not easy to wait, I don't know. There's so many different in the bathroom. If you're at a big place, you have to wait for the restroom. Like there's a lot of waiting that goes along in our life. Not even spiritual, right? Those are just daily things that you're doing. Although we carry them with us, we want it to be spiritual too, but in the spiritual too, right? We have to wait. And there are so many verses on wait. And I think of the song, Wait on the Lord. It's out on Caleb, but it talks about waiting on him, and that he'll give you grace to stand, right? And when things don't make sense, just wait on him. And the waiting season is hard. Like it really, really is hard. But I think it piggybacks on what we've already talked about, right? Which is that submission and that trust and the truth, because because that's going to help us in the waiting season. And we know that God hears us, but sometimes he gives us a yes, sometimes he gives us a no, and sometimes he's very quiet. And that's your waiting. You're waiting on him to answer those questions. And this is just a deep question, really, because sometimes it could be we're waiting because he already told us and we didn't listen. It could be we're waiting because we really haven't heard from him yet, or we're waiting because we're just not sure where to go or what to do. And it all piggybacks on that trust, trusting God, being around the people that Jessica had mentioned too, your community, right? And or your coaches or your counselors, and kind of being able to flesh that out. And you may still have to wait by yourself. That's his process to bring you closer to him, that I've found in my life. And it's very uncomfortable. It's not very fun. It's not glitz and glamour. It's just the waiting. And in that time though, if we spend time with him, right, and we're reading and we're praying and we're worshiping and we're trying to really listen, like I think he's going to honor that. And he has in the past in my life. But yeah, it's definitely a very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. It's that awkward silence, you know?
Absolutely. Kina says over on Facebook, waiting is a lot, but in your waiting season, it builds up faith and patience. Personally, for me, it was not easy for me, but I'm learning to wait until God, in God's timing. His time is perfect. God makes up wait because we may not be ready, or it's not God's time, still has work to do with us. Thank you for sharing that, Kina. Jeanette, did you have any thoughts?
I just think of it as in gardening terms. You know, we have like a overwinter or even a period where the seed needs to grow underneath. So sometimes there's friction, there's a freeze that has to happen. And I kind of translate some of the things in my life, like knee pain, you know, a process of friction and pain so that I can become stronger. And I just I understand that, you know, that God has the perfect timing.
Love that. I love that analogy because it made me immediately go, and there's also seasons, and you can't trade out a season because there's a work happening in every plant in every season that are all necessary for the full cycle of that plant life. Because even the value is not strictly in the harvest, because the seeds, the leftovers of that harvest produce the next crop, right? So like how it's an ongoing cycle, and every season of the cycle has a purpose. And that's true in waiting. And I think that speaks a lot to what you were saying, Lisa, about the waiting fleshes out a lot of things. It fleshes out our own intentions, it fleshes out our heart, it fleshes out um, motives, but it also identifies the fears and the doubts that we may be holding on to. I know last week we talked about forgiveness. It may root out our resentments and our bitterness or our offenses that we're holding on to. But I love that it also speaks to what Aisha said, that it's also the time of preparation. Sometimes there's something that we're learning in a season. Honestly, it made me think of the Karate Kid, right?
Wax
Like
on, wax off.
wax on, wax off, right? It's that he was so irritated, right? Because he had this dream and he had this thing he could see that he wanted. He wanted to know the martial arts, he wanted to compete, he wanted to defend himself, right? Like there were all these things he wanted for himself. Well, he wanted to defend himself because he'd been hurt. Right? He was tired of being taken advantage of and he was hurt, right? And um, and he wanted the skills so it could build that confidence and produce for him. But in the tediousness, you know, what I loved about Mr. Miyagi didn't tell him why he was doing those things. He didn't tell him why he had to do it. He just said, go do this thing. Be in the day in and the day out of this thing, right? And he was getting irritated and he was frustrated and he felt behind and he felt like he was losing ground. And how often is that true in our waiting season? We get frustrated and we get behind because we can't see it, right? There are things that you are doing today that God has asked you to do that are preparing you for things that you don't even know. You may see some of the fruit of why, because he may have said, do this now for this purpose, right? Raise up your children in this season, right? Well, you've been given that for now, but there's a greater purpose in that child for the kingdom that's beyond the you raising up, right? So there's fruit even beyond, and that was true in that storyline, right? Because yes, wax on, wax off, the up and the down. He was being trained not just in his mindset, but in his your muscles can be trained, right? And so like the skills were being developed along the way, but he didn't know it. He didn't know it at the time. And what's true for any of us, because I'll say this too, sometimes we're in waiting seasons all the time. We may not be waiting. We have big waiting seasons where it feels like everything in life is in waiting. But for a lot of us, there are certain parts of our life that we may be waiting in. And so part of it may be holding to what's being developed in me. That word that the preparation stew, as Aisha put it, right? What's being stirred there? Because we're getting trained in our heart muscle, right? Sometimes God has taken pieces to give us a whole heart to walk into that next thing. Sometimes he's actually giving us literal skills. I look back, y'all, I joined Instagram strictly. I was a one and done with social media up until 2020. And I only joined Instagram because it was the way to see all my nieces and nephews, because all of my siblings played there, right? But God spent all of 2020, I was having to learn this platform. I never knew I was really going to use it for business. And that's why I was playing for all those things. That there were things he was developing 6 years ago in skills that I was a little annoyed of having to open another platform and mess with it. But I learned so much about what I need for business today because I was playing back here. And because my siblings were playing there and I didn't, right? So like, and I know that that's a little one, but he's doing that. It's things as simple as growing our literal skill sets for things that we're going to hold. But sometimes he's also growing our spiritual muscles, our ability to have trust and belief in his goodness and his trustworthiness. And so in that waiting, it fuels your future. That faith fuels your future because it is preparing you in so many ways. It's building your trustworthiness, like we talked about it a minute ago, because it's that one thing, like you guys were talking about, So I love that. And you guys had so many wonderful things to say today about that. So thank you. What?
So to use your example with, Mr. Miyagi and Daniel, right? They now have the older version of Daniel, right? Where he's now using the skills that Mr. Miyagi taught him. So it is kind of that full fruition type situation. He didn't know that way back when he's painting and waxing, but then now he's a full grown man, opening his own dojo and all the issues. And that's the whole thing. But just because he's using those same skills and the same type of training that he had. And so I think you're right. When we're in it and we're in that waiting season or in that training period or that building that discipline out, it doesn't feel comfortable and we may not be able to see it and the fruit of it right at that moment. But later on, you may very well be using that example or that story or that training period to help others walk out their faith too. So I just thought that was neat because when you were talking about that, I was like, oh yeah. And then there's a fast forward version that we can see now of that story.
I love that. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, my noise got weird. Renee Salvery says, sometimes we are waiting because we are not ready for what God has for us. He is gathering all the pieces together. We need to operate in the assignment we have been called to. Spiritually, the things that we may be missing, and also physically. One of the things I also thought about in the waiting as you were talking, Lisa, is the other side of waiting. Sometimes you're waiting and it's not because of you. Okay. Because a lot of things that we're waiting on require other people who are also in process. And I think about that, just a real quick example before we cover our last topic for today. When I worked at the hospital, I was ready to start looking for a job about year 7. I was there for 10 years. And when I say that, I don't mean that softly. I mean, I was really ready to start looking. I mean, I would try. I was exhausted in some things. I was worn out, frustrated about not just that, but just the impact it was having just on me personally in the season I was having. And I kept praying and I kept looking and doors kept closing and nothing was opening up. And when I finally left the hospital, I didn't know it was because I was going to help start a counseling department in a church. And when I left the hospital, it took another 2 months for that department to exist on paper. That place wasn't ready for me yet back at year 7. It was ready at year 10. And so also being aware that sometimes in the waiting, you're not just waiting because of your own process. Sometimes you're waiting for the alignment of the other people involved in your process. So, Renee says, that is the conclusion of our waiting. It is about other people. And Aisha said, waiting is alignment. And I think that really is the truth. Waiting is about the alignment of the people it's for, the people who are working with us, ourselves, with him, and the resources, right? It's all those things coming together. So the last thing we're going to look at today is faith in the little equals faith in God's abundance. And so now to him who is able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us, to him be the glory in the church by Jesus Christ to all generations forever and ever. So Ephesians 3:20 and 21 shows the character and capacity of God. His capacity is abundance. One who is faithful in the very little is also faithful in the much. That's in Luke 16:10. We often see in scripture in the lives of believers that the demonstration of faith with the little, aka the stewardship of the little that God gives us, is what moves God to release the more to his children. And it's interesting because in weightlifting, I did some weightlifting in a season of my life, and one of the things to think about is if we're not consistently engaged with that 10-pound weight, that 20-pound weight, that 50-pound weight, then we have not built the muscle structure to prepare my body to lift 200 pounds, right? All you muscle people out there in this group today. Yep. Right. Without proper training, conditioning, stress endurance, I would get hurt under the weight of more. Right. And so it's what came to mind, the picture that came to mind when I thought about, there's so many sermons out there that some of us may have heard about stewarding the little, right? Taking care of that. You have the talents and in scripture and all these places in scripture that talk about what am I doing with what I've got, the little that I've been given right now. But what we do with it actually demonstrates our faith for what's beyond it, right? But what we do with it is also sometimes, just like we were talking about in the waiting, that preparation for the more, the abundance. And so my question to you ladies are, what are some of the ways we can demonstrate faith in the little? And what are some of the things we can do to help our mindset about the little? Any thoughts?
So who's going to go first? First thing that comes to mind is prayer. That's a muscle that you have to develop over time. And sometimes you think, or you just have no faith in that the prayer is going to work because it is in the waiting. And it's not like you can talk to God and say, hey, I want to start this business and I want to have 10 likes today. Doesn't work like that. So you have to develop and mature. And when you mature, you build the muscle. And by maturing, you go back to the word and you surround yourself with people of wisdom. And it is the everyday devotion, who is your company, to help you build those muscles that strengthens you. So.
Absolutely. That maturation process.
Mm-hmm.
Aisha, are you raising your hand again, or is it just still up?
Yeah, I just had a thought. So I so love the workout muscle thing because I kind of do a little bit of that. But you understand, like, even an extension of what you said regarding this last segment, when you're lifting weights, it's important to stage your progression with the right amount of weight. But it's also very important for you to steward that process very well by making sure your mind and your muscle is connected.
Mm-hmm.
And a practical way of explaining that day to day is, oh God, you told me that I'm going to get a new house. You told me I'm going to get a new car. But in your new house, did you clean it?
Mm.
Are you vacuuming? Are you decorating it? Are you bringing people into your home and serving the people in your home? And your new car, are you making sure it's, top notch? So stewarding where you are and the stage that you are is that act of faith, and is that act of telling God that I am ready for the next. And I think that's very important, especially in my life. That's what I had to learn. And of course, it took all my life to learn it, because that's how we are, you know what I mean? But that's kind of what I wanted to share. Steward the season that you're in very, very well until God opens the door for the next season.
Absolutely. Thinking about what you and Julie just shared, one of the things that really stood out to me together is, when I think about that stewardship, going back to the weightlifting piece, one of the things about weightlifting is it's never just about the weight, right? If you want to steward your body's ability to grow in its capacity, you're not just being aware of the structure of the weight and the progression of the weight, you're having to be aware of your nutrition. What are you putting in your body to lift that weight? What are you putting in your body after you lifted the weight? Right? What kind of sleep are you getting so that your body goes into repair mode? You're not just stewarding the one thing you're actually looking at. And when I think about ministries and business and family and relationship, we can get very singularly focused that I'm stewarding this one thing, or I want to, and that to me gets to that mindset about the little. We start to limit what that thing is, when in reality, there's all these other things we're stewarding, because all those things come together, right? That it isn't just about that singular thing. Part of stewarding my business is stewarding my heart and stewarding relationships, because if I'm not aware of what am I doing with compassion and kindness and mercy and forgiveness, that's going to matter in my business, right? How I handle all of those things is going to matter how I show up in ministry, or how I'm parenting, or how I'm showing up as a husband or a wife. Like, those things matter. And so it isn't just, I want to grow this business and do this thing. What are those other things that I'm stewarding when I have the perception that this is little and I want it to be bigger, right? Sometimes I've worked with a lot of families and children over time. Sometimes we can get so in the task, we forget we're actually stewarding something much bigger, right? Because we assign it something little. The way we believe about a thing really sets the amount of fruit that we'll produce, right? We see this a lot, like in it's kind of like, if I think I'm not smart, how does that impact the decisions I make? What does it do to what I will speak to people? How much of myself I'll share with people? What risks I'll take? What job opportunities I'll step into? We call that a limiting belief, right? And so our perspective of what little is and what it means can impact how we show up to stewarding it, right? And so if I view it as just this little thing, when in reality, God gave me a business and I'm serving 10 people, that may feel little. Or I can say, wow, I have been given the privilege to pour into 10 people's lives. And I'm going to do my very best for client 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? Because how I show up to that, one, is going to impact how I walk away from it. Right? It's that old adage of, I don't have to do this, I get to do this. Right? But that one word changes the entire flow, right, of how I show up to it, how I feel walking away from it. It informs how we feel about it a lot of times, because us humans, we tend to apply value and judgment to things. And so working on our word about what does little mean, and that stewardship of little, can go a long way. Any other closing thoughts on the little before we wrap up? Okay. So my call to action this week is I just want you guys to identify one thing you can do to take an intentional action to walk out one step deeper in faith in one of the 4 areas we identified today. So looking at what is faith in the waiting, faith in the little, faith in the doubt and fear, faith in the submission. Any of those areas, what's one step you can take this week to take a step into deeper faith so that you can walk in God's goodness, his trustworthiness, his timing, and his abundance. So, and share it with somebody you trust. I'm always going to tell you to do that. Accountability is key. So, Miss Lisa, I'm going to let you take us out with anything we need to know.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This was such a good conversation and lots to think about and implement. And I'm sure you'll be checking in and being like, what's your thing? What's your takeaway or what's your call to action? So, well, I get to do announcements, which I'm excited about. So, one big thing that I want to tell you guys about, if you're in the Lawrenceville area tonight, Wednesday night, that's tonight, 7:30 at TIC on Lawrenceville Southwest. No, hang on, Simonton Southwest in Lawrenceville. It's Tabernacle International Church. Our very own Elizabeth Copeland is going to be presenting at church and that's her church. So we're excited about that. If you're in the area, would you bless her by showing up? Especially if you have nowhere else to go, like show up, be there, even if you have somewhere to go. I think it would be just really cool if she looks out in the audience and she sees, faces from GCBN and NACWE. So share it with your people so that they can come too. We do have a GCBN quarterly meeting coming up. It is in person. It's going to be at Cornerstone, Cornerstone Co-working. I'm going to go over here to the Facebook page so you guys can see that. I don't know where my voice is going. You can find this on the Facebook group or the Facebook page. You go to events and you'll see all of our events here. Look, Living Well Wednesday is happening now. That's awesome. So scroll down here and you'll see the quarterly meeting. It's on the 18th at 9:30. You do need to register for this. GCBN members have a discounted rate to be able to attend. You can bring friends that are not GCBN members. That's great. And there are tickets available in Eventbrite, and the link is here. You can grab that. It is on our Facebook page, and I think it is on our website as well. We have next week, Toby is going to be, I love Toby. She's going to be on our Transformation Tuesday platform. She's going to be talking about shifting through spiritual roadblocks. So check that out. Every Monday we have prayer. So join Renee Salvery and Beth. And I want to say there's like 16 registered for that on the Zoom. We do have registrations now. So on our Zoom meetings, you're going to need to register for that. All you have to do is go to the link that's in our newsletter or what Rose emails out. Click on that link to register and then check your email. It will send you the Zoom link and the Zoom codes to be able to get into that. And yesterday, Jeanette shared, and it was very wise. So thank you for sharing that, Jeanette, is to write that code down either in your planner, on a sticky note on your desk so that you have it. Because in 2 weeks, when you're trying to get on a Wellness Wednesday or a Living Well Wednesday, you don't have to search for it. It'll be right there for you. Or Rose is like, bookmark it. I'm like, do we do that? I don't even know if we do that anymore. I don't bookmark, but so you could also bookmark it. Living Well Wednesday next week is Future Focus and Forgive. That's the topic that we're talking about all month. So come check that out on Wednesday, Saturday the 18th. Am I on the right days? Yes, I am. Okay. I got nervous really fast. This GCBN quarterly membership meeting is on Saturday. So make sure you guys share that out for us and help us get people there. We have James Cox, who is a GCBN member, as well as Phyllis. They are going to be talking about vision and goal setting. So, and kind of revamping that and putting that into your business, into practice. And it's April, so you still have lots of time to goal set and lots of time to vision cast for the year. So check out our website, gcbnetwork.com, and God Golf and Girls. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about God Golf and Girls. I got my GGG shirt on here, my jacket. August 14th through the 16th. It's a 3-day weekend for women to have a retreat. There's a little piece of golf, but don't let the golf scare you away, and check that out. It's on our website as well. There's a whole tab for that. Rose has created that, and it has videos and photos and all the information that you would need. But registration is open, so check that out. And Jess, I'm gonna give you one last word, and then we'll close it out. I know you have your call to action. You have anything?
I shared that, but
do you have anything?
What I guess what I would say ultimately is, with our topic this month about faith forward, future focus, and forgiving, as we looked at all those things in faith today, just being aware that the deeper we go in our faith, we're allowing ourselves to let God have more capacity in our lives, which is always going to build our future. So I'll leave you with that.
That's really good. Thank you for the call to action. Thank you for that. And if this was valuable to you, which I know it was, share this out on your Facebook feeds for other people to be able to glean. And we are